Okay, so where we left off, we got our grades working. I need to start my server. But we have this component and like maybe we want to move on and do like users and we want to do skills like these on mount where we go grab data. And we've been doing that quite a bit. And now we're adding loaders and spinners. And we're trying to say we're spending some time doing this stuff in the hopes that like this is going to save us time later. Another thing it's going to do, this is going to help keep our app consistent, like how it looks. And also in the code, we want our code to be more consistent. So it's easier for us to understand and people who come into our code base. So something we're doing a lot of is we're doing a lot of this on mount loading, where we go do an Axios call to get some data when we mount. And something that's very common in just programming is, we want to kind of abstract all of this work and make it generic and reuse this logic. It's kind of like writing a function. We don't want to repeat ourselves. So one awesome thing with hooks is hooks help us to do that. We can create our own hooks. And we'll do some examples throughout this course of some custom hooks, but let's go ahead and do our first example. So what I'm going to do, and I recommend you would add this to your starter project as well, is let's create a new folder and call them hooks. Call this a hooks folder. Now we can create a new hook. So it's just a JavaScript file. Now there's some rules with hooks. We have to start our hook name with use, lowercase use. Just like React does, use state, use effect. We're going to start this with use. And then I give it the name. I'm going to call this use Axios on mount.js. And for this, I'm going to make another page for this, just so we can have references to the way we did grades just a second ago and the new way we're going to do it. So I'm going to create a new page and call this grades with hook.js. Maybe I'll call this Axios, so just to be a little more clear. It's a long name for a component, but. And I'm just going to take whatever I have in my grades file and I'm just going to copy and paste it in here for now. So it's the same component. I'm just going to change the name. Just call this grades with hook. Or no, let's keep it the same. Axios, grades with Axios hook. That's the only place I need to change that. And then in my app.js.
Right. Are we recording?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Thanks for checking though. Always safe, better safe than sorry, or whatever that saying goes. You're safe than sorry. Now what I'm going to do for this, I can go ahead and just create two paths and have one be the grades with Axios hook. And then I can just like toggle these. I'm just going to comment that one out. Or you could go and create your own path and create a nav link. But I'm going to do the grades with Axios hook, but keep that grades component the same just so we have it to reference. And I could just check that. I'm getting a 404 error, did I not? Oh yeah. I don't really care about the errors anymore. I know those are working, so I'm gonna fix those routes so I don't get the 404 anymore. Cool. So now that, I should probably maybe I want to make my database a little smaller. So it'll take forever. So now it's working. Just copied it, got it working. But now let's kind of think about what I'm going to do with this hook. Because like I said, all of this stuff, this is going to be the same for each of my like components, right? I'm going to have like some sort of data that I'm going to be getting. I'm going to have a loader. I'm going to have an error. I'm going to have this use effect where I call to get whatever. And then I have that get whatever function that's essentially going to do all of this. So let's look at this custom component. And I'm just going to start writing this out. So this is just going to be a function. So I'm going to call this const and just show you how to write a hook. Const use Axios on mount. Yeah, it's just a function. Export default use Axios on mount. So it's just a function. When it comes to like when we're looking at our, what's one thing that is definitely going to be different between like getting grades and getting users and getting skills? I mean, if you kind of just look at this function because it's in here. What's the one thing that's really going to change?
The URL in the Axios column.
Yeah, that's something that needs to be different. Something else that might be a little different, and we're going to be a little limited by this, it's how the data is coming back. You know, it could potentially come back like res.data or res. Whatever. So we're going to make an assumption it's coming back as, it's always going to be coming back as res.data. Which is not a great assumption, but we'll kind of just have that for now. But yeah, the one thing that I am going to want is I'm going to want a URL for this function. So if someone uses my use Axios on mount, they need to tell me the URL to go get the data from. But what I want to do here is I want to import, I know I'm going to want to have some state and my use effect. I can grab those from React. I'm also going to want Axios because this is actually where I'm going to do my Axios call because they gave me the URL. So now I can do my Axios call. Now I could just take this state or this grades function and let's just throw this. I kind of want to just show you this. So I'm just going to throw all this stuff here. Set grades. Let's go ahead and grab this get grades function inside of here. This is what my hook is going to look like. Now, should this be called grades? If this is generic? No. I mean, what should we call it? Any ideas?
Data.
Yeah, I like data, I think is a great name because it's just the data we're going to be getting back. So I'm going to call this function set data. Loading and error, I think those are good. Those are exactly what they are. I don't think I need to change those names. What about the initial state? Is that always going to be in an array? Because think we could get a specific grade, which we would expect to come back as an object. So I'm not going to default that to. Sorry, I got Siri going.
I don't understand.
Shut up, Siri. Okay. I think I'm just going to set that to null because I could maybe have them pass that in as an argument, like the default state. But for now, I'm just going to set this to null initially because I'm not going to have any default by data. Yeah, and so this is no longer get grades. I'm going to call this get data, just to keep this generic. Get data. That's the same. The setting error is the same. This is where I use the URL. They need to give me the URL that was given to me when I use this function. And then I'm going to set data. I could do something like this. I could see, hey, is there res.data.data? We'll set it to that. If not, set it to res.data. That would at least give me the, like, to check, is there res.data.data? If there's res.data.data, I can use that. If not, I'm going to use res.data. This is, this will not work if it doesn't come back as res.data.data or res.data. So that's just something to keep in mind. Oh yeah, and Tom, I slacked out. There was a little Slack overflow about why you would want to, or reasons you'd want to finally block. And I think one of the big ones was, well, what if you have an error in your catch block? Then it's kind of like an end all be all to kind of like catch something like that. So we really don't, for this case, we really wouldn't need to finally block, but that was
Makes a lot of sense, actually.
yeah. Because if we don't have the finally and we have code down here and an error like gets thrown in your catch block, then it's gonna, yeah, not.
It's also if you return something from your try catch block too, right?
Yeah, so if you return something, the finally will get returned as well, or run as well. So maybe you need to do like some cleanup or something. But for this example, it would be the same, like nothing special is going on there. So either one would be fine there. Cool. So does this kind of make sense what's going on here? We're just kind of abstracting that's all of this stuff we've been doing. And we're just kind of getting the use URL. But notice how these are not like, these are kind of doled out, these data loading and error. And this is just a function. I mean, it is a hook. React's going to do some special stuff, but what do you think we need to do with these things?
You need to return them somehow.
Yeah. So we have 3 things we need to return. So this is kind of going back to that brain teaser yesterday, right? How do we return that? Well, we have a choice. I could do it as an array or an object. Data, loading, and error, or return data, loading, error. Let's talk about the pros and cons of returning it as an object or a array. So here with an object, order doesn't matter when someone uses this. But name does. With an array, order does matter. What they call it does. What they name it. What I mean by that, because here's how we're going to use this hook. We're going to say, I'm going to come here and I could say let data loading error equal use Axios on mount, and then give it the like API/grades. So if I do it as a object, you know, the order doesn't matter. I could say that loading error data. I don't have to match how this is getting returned. I have to match the names. With my array, I could do it like this. So I could name these anything I want, but it has to, like these, X would be data, Y would be loading, and Z would be error. Does that kind of make sense? So I think with this one, I don't mind these names, data, loading, and error. I think that's fine. So I'm going to return this as a object. Then I don't have to worry about the order of things. I just have to worry about the name. And I know this use Axios on mounts going to give me some data, and it's going to give me this loading variable, and it's going to give me an error. And actually, if I wanted to rename this, I can do the as. So I could call this as like, oh wait, not in my return though. I could do that right here, like as grades. If I really did want to rename that, I can do it like that. I think we'll try that. Let me make sure when we run that, but let's have this just return this data loading and error. Cool. So now our grades on with Axios hook. Let's go ahead and import use Axios on mount. So I can get rid of that. I can get rid of this. I still need my render. I'm going to get rid of all of these. I'm going to do this const. Let's call this data. And yeah, let's rename this because it's called grades in this. Or how do I do this? Is it data? Sorry, maybe it's this way. It's that way. That's how I can rename data. I can do a colon and then the new name. Loading error equals use Axios on mount / API / grades. So I'm just going to say this just in a comment. So I'm destructuring grades here and renaming it, or destructuring data, because I have to call that data because that's what this use Axios on mount returns, and renaming it to grades. So that's how, this is just ES6. That's how you can rename something destructuring data if you want to rename that variable. All right. let's refresh that. Loading. There's our loader. And there's our data. But now our code's a lot cleaner. And we're handling all of this use Axios on mount stuff. All of this kind of shared logic, we're just going to have this in one place. We do the loading, the error. You know, maybe down the road, we like do a little better error handling. So we only need to handle it here in one file. And then all of our components using this will maybe get better at get better error handling. So we're really starting to like create these reusable components that are going to keep our main pages a little cleaner. So yeah, if we want to say do users, let's do that. Let's do a users.js. I'm just going to import copy home in here for now. Users. Let's add this to our app.js. Path for that, users. Let's import that. So just add that path, add the import. And then just to make this easy on ourselves, let's add it to our navbar. I almost feel like we're doing a lot of copy and pasting with our navbar. We can maybe change this up, but let's just keep this the same. So this is going to be users. And users. So now we have that users page on there. So yeah, now we can use, instead of doing like setting up all our state again, setting in the use effect, I can just say const data. And yeah, if I want to rename that to users, I can. Loading and set loading, or sorry, loading and error. Do that from use Axios on mount /API/users. And I can do something like this. Const render users. You know, we can kind of do this same thing. If error, let's copy this, what I have here. So if we have our error, let's just return the load, or sorry, if we're loading, let's return our semantic loader. If error, we can return our semantic load error. Let's say error occurred getting users. If I'm going to just get rid of this one. And then if we don't have loading, or if we're not loading, or we don't have an error, then we can go ahead and render over our data. So we can do return our users dot map. Go through each user. Let's put this in a div. Let's just put this in a paragraph. User dot name. And they need to return this. So return this stuff. Render users. Oh, so I need to import the semantic loader. So that's really, I mean, the loader's there, but this one's pretty fast. If that's a bad URL, there's my error. How's this seeming?
More efficient.
More efficient. Should we do, we could go one level deeper with this reusability. I think we could kind of make like this whole loading and error and mapping. Because really what we have with our grades with Axios Hook and what we have with our users is we almost have this list almost, or we almost have like this list component, right? This list that does a Axios call and then renders some stuff. So should we do one more little in-depth like reusable component? Is this, do you guys like doing this? I think this is like, this makes React cool. Just to see how much we can clean this up. Okay, so let's, yeah. What I'm gonna have, this is really, so let's just create this component and then kind of talk about what it's gonna do. List, I don't know, loader. I don't know what to call this. Yeah, let's just do a list loader because it's good. I think this one is maybe going to be specific to a list. And it's going to load data. So what I want to do here is, let's just copy our home just to stub this out. And let's do another page. I just kind of like having these demos, user list loader. So we're going to have this, we're going to create this users page again that is going to use this list loader component. And then from now I can just take one of my like my home.js and throw that inside of here. Call this user list loader. Cool. And actually what I'll do is I'll just throw this inside of my users component. It's just, you know, with users list loader. So we don't have to create a new like route for it. And I'm going to throw this above. Okay. And then we're going to grab that component, users list loader. So what I've done is I've created this users list loader component, which is just stubbed out JSX. It's just a basic component. And then in my components, I have this list loader component. And then my users is just rendering the user list loader component. So there's my header and there's the users list loader component. And then my users list loader component, this is going to eventually use my list loader. So let's just import that list loader. So there's my header, there's my users list loader, which renders my list loader component. Does anyone need any of this code? Should I just, let's see, let me Slack out the users. So y'all have this. So I'll first Slack out the users. And then the users list loader. And then the list loader. Probably should have just called that list, but okay. So those are the three components I just made or have changed with this. Okay, so my lists all seem to do this thing where I want to see if it's loading or there's an error. And they all grab the data as well with the use Axios on mount. So my list loader component, I'm going to want, let's just copy all of this. And let's copy this map function. So this is a component. So I'm going to get props. I'm just going to destructure right up here. So this is going to need a URL. I know that for sure. I need my URL right here. And I'm not going to call this users anymore. I'm just going to leave that as data. And then do data.map. Then maybe I want like an error. Well, let's leave it like this and let's just see if we can get this working on our list because it's essentially the same thing. I just need to make sure I pass it the URL for now. And I'm going to call this, but I'm going to call this render data instead. And then down here, I can call that render data function. I'm not going to Slack this out yet because I'm going to make some changes, but let's just see if this is working. So I'm going to go back to this one. To my users. And actually, I'm just going to comment this part we have working for now out, so it's a little less confusing or a little less messy. Okay, so now I have my user list loader. So now I do need to give this a prop. I need to give it the URL, which is going to be /API/users. And then that, because really, right, we're not doing any of this. This is all my function is right now. But let's see if that's working. Okay, so I have a whole bunch of, I forgot to import stuff on my list loader component. So let's grab our Axios on mount, our semantic air, and our semantic loader. Cool, so it's kind of working. I'm getting an error getting users. Use Axios on mount. This is where this gets hard. List loader. Let's console.log the URL. See if that's getting passed. List loader line 7. Yeah, so that's our error there. We're not getting a URL here. Let me just hard code one in here. Because I wanted to go to API/users. Cool. So that's my problem so far is I'm not getting the URL. So then I can go back to where I'm actually doing this, which is my users. User list loader. Oh, I need to pass that down. So my user list loader, that is going to take, I need that to pass that URL down. That's why it's not. I had that intermediate component. Actually, I'm not gonna throw this one here. I'm gonna get rid of that URL there. So I wanna like just keep this, that's all this should render right here. And I'm gonna do all this stuff here. So I'm actually not gonna do this. So in my user list loader, because this is really should be my page. This is where I'm gonna throw in my URL. Right, because really what I want is I want this to be my user list loader component here. Maybe that's going to make this little, because I want this to be the main page. It's just going to say user list loader, and then we go render that when we go to users. And now that's working. Kind of. I mean, it works for this page. But there's a little issue with my list loader component, right? Can anyone see or why it's not maybe the best? Has to do with like this map function.
The data might not necessarily have a name, right?
Yeah, this is like hard coded. It might have a name. I might want to change it. So yeah, that's not the best. So here's what I'm going to do. Actually, I'm going to call this render list, this function inside of here, because that's really what it's doing. Now, what I'm going to do for this map, like this map, I don't know how a list should be, like how an item should be rendered, right? If this is like a generic component. So what I'm going to have, who's ever using my list loader, I'm going to have them give me a render data function that they're going to pass to me via props. And that render data, they're going to give that to me, and then I'm going to call that on the data.map. So let's look at how that might look. And let me just go back to, I'm going to keep this render list. But what I want to show, so I'm just going to take this code that was there before. I'm going to command exit and put this render data in here. I'm going to change that, and then render data. Okay, so there's my list loader. And then in my users list loader, I give it that render data prop. And I could just set that equal to that function, or to what was in that map function. So I'm just taking what was in that map function and just putting it in that render data function. So it's doing the same thing now, right? Because there's the function to render one user. And that works. And now I can like change this and like, maybe I want that to be like a card component. I don't know how this is going to look, but now they're in lovely cards. So there's my user list loader component. So this is kind of like, this is kind of a little inception-y, huh? But let's do another, let's just do one more component just to kind of show what we've done. So let's say I want to then go in and do our skills page. Skills.js. I'm just going to copy my home, throw that in here. Call this skills. Skills. And then I'm going to go set this up in my nav bar just so I have this link. Skills. Skills and skills. So then, oh, do I not have that defined? So my app.js, oh, I need to define that new page for skills. So this is just me adding another route. import skills. Okay, there we go. There's my skills component. So it's set up. So now I can just grab my list loader and give it the URL. That's going to be equal to /API /skills, and then give it the render data function. And now I can be like, well, hey, how do I want to render this? It's going to give me a list, but how do I want to render a specific skill in this case? So I could, come and define my, I'm just really defining a anonymous, like React component right here. So this could be like a skill. And then I can just return some JSX. Because this is the function that's getting passed to the map function. Is what's going on there. And I believe a skill has a name. Skill.name. Let's just do this in a card for fun. Card. But a skill also has a description. Card is not defined. And there we go. There's my skills. That list loader, maybe in my list loader, I don't really need that header. Or I could have a header inside of here and pass that down as props. Like maybe I do want a header. Like, yeah, let's call that header. So now that can take a header prop, which then in my skills, I could, add that here. Skills, yo. So this is my skills page. It's and just a list load, like on this skills page here. I could have like a button for like a new skill button. And then I could have this list loader that renders the data. And like I can put on click handlers on here. On click equals handle click. Because maybe I want to click this and like grab the skill.id. And have like a handle click function to find up here. So now when I click on these, it is logging the ID. I think adding the on click on a button on a card component gives it this like styling that makes it look like a link. So I could have my new skill form here, and then I have this loader that loads that list. So like we've thrown all of this, we've reused all of this logic. I mean, if we look at like our original grades where we started, like this is like, I don't know, 10 lines of code that does our API call, does loading, does error handling, can render specific data. We can change this. We can see we can reuse this, but it's behind the scenes. It's doing all of this. It's setting this state. It's doing the use effect. It's rendering. It's mapping over there. It's setting the data. It's doing the async call. So yeah, this was probably a little like advanced going into the list loader. What I'd want to see you do for homework and on your starter project is to add like this use Axios on mount hook. Because that's something we do so much, right? We mount a component. This is data, this is stuff we can just reuse all the time. Something else might be like loaders. You might want to create your own custom special loader. And because you can like go search for like loaders and spinners, and then you can like get them working, and then you can kind of go like tweak them, like tweak the CSS to make them bigger, smaller, or your color. And then you can make your own little custom spinners. We can make our like nice little error handling messages. This one's pretty generic. This would be pretty easy to reuse across projects, right? Actually, this user list thing, I think this can be, or this could be reused quite a bit. We're kind of stuck with the same loader and the same error handler, but that's actually kind of nice because that's going to make our app very consistent, because all our lists are going to work. They're going to have the same loader. They're going to have the same error handling. Except this is saying error occurred getting users, so I might need to like do something like that. Or if I want to make that more specific, I'm going to need to pass down a prop. So wherever I use that, I could do like an error message and add that as a prop. And then I need to, pass that on down. Error message. Pass that finally to the loader. And then that has an error message. Except I'm using the header there. So yeah, that's where this you can run into issues here. I'm using the header. I need to pass it to where, I just need to call that header, I believe. Skills right here. Pass that there. You could also check, do I have an error message? Use it. If not, use that generic error occurred. So this is where these components, these can be like UI components, but they can get pretty heavy in logic. So you'll look at something that's like an air handler or just something that displays a message and it's like 200 lines of code. Because and it's kind of a trade-off. Because when you're trying to make things generic and reusable, you're going to probably be adding complexity in the component. So it's kind of like on your homework, it's probably like if you're just doing something quick and it's in a day, it's like, well, maybe you don't want to make this reusable component because you're only going to reuse it like 2 or 3 times. But if it's like a project where you're going to reuse it 200 times in, 50 different files, then it makes a lot of sense to really make it reusable. I mean, I wonder if we can go like inspect like a semantic UI component. Or like an ant design component. Like I've looked at this library before. It's actually, since we've been using semantic, let's go there. Let's see if their components are visible. Where would it be? Yeah, let's like look at their button component. I mean, here's just like their button file. Button group. Let's look at the button.js. Yeah, here's the button component. I think a button would be pretty simple, right? There's your button for semantic UI. But if we go to look at semantic UI React, their button component is pretty functional. There's a lot you can do with it. You can click it, you can give it different styles. There's animations on it, nice little hover animations. There's like these icons you can throw to the left or right. You can color them. You can make it out of an icon, different stylings, put them in groups. You can have this little or thing. It can be active, disabled, spinners, different sizes. So that's why like these components themselves can get like complicated. But then when you go to actually use a semantic button, it's really easy to use it. You just have to give it like prompts. Like, oh, I want this to be inverted and color orange. Well, boom, you have an inverted orange button. Or like, I want an icon, a labeled icon on the left. Just give it a button, icon labeled position left, and then pass it the icon. This is what makes React really cool. It's because you can go define these components, which are kind of their own little self-contained apps that can be pretty complicated. But then once you define that and once you get them working, then using them can be super simple. Like this list loader, we just give it like a header, a URL, and a way to render the data. And then it does all that error handling, the spinner, and all that stuff. Cool. So yeah, since we're giving you so long to work on this has many through homework, I know we didn't really even talk about has many through that much today. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. But part of this, since you have like 5 days on this assignment, part of this assignment is to kind of start building that starter project. So you don't have to like use Axios on Mount in your homework, like for your doctor's assignment, but it's probably going to help you, right? And you should add this to your starter project. So next time when you clone something down, you can use that hook. There's also there's already a use Axios hook library that someone else wrote that does something similar. If you're interested in, you can use this. This one's better. You can use it not only on mount, but you can use it for like put and patch and post updates. So you can use this for all your CRUD actions. Because that's a limitation of our use Axios on mount. We only do get. And we only do it on mount. So they give you this refetch method, which allows you to actually, you can like click a button and call this, you do the Axios call. So you can do it on mount, or you can do it on whenever a button's clicked or something like that. Cool. I think that's it for me. Let me push this up. Any questions? How was that? I think this is where React gets to be a lot of fun. It's challenging. This is definitely something that is, I think you're going to find you like try to make something generic, but you really kind of pigeonhole yourself into like a specific use case. To make something reusable is challenging, but it's something that's good to start working on now, because it's not just React. It's like you do that with like functions, you do that with classes. We're trying to like write code, organize some like abstractions into like a file and reuse those abstractions. Is it Thursday? Cool. So just what I'm going to say for the homework, just so since we're all here, because I'm going to keep adding to this homework. So keep on working on the has many. But for some other, like, I'm going to do like starter project. For this, let's do like add use Axios on mount hook. Let's do add a error handling component. Just kind of like I did, one that can like stringify JSON that an error object, you know. I'll put that here, stringify. Stringify JSON like an error object. Let's do add a spinner. And for this, try like a custom one as like a bonus. You can use semantic, but I'll just say this bonus. You can make multiple of these. You don't need just one spinner. You could have like 5 spinners in your starter project. And then as a bonus, I'm going to say this as a bonus. You know, do a like the list render component. And you can try making your own. You don't have to do it the way I did it. There's tons of different ways to maybe try that, but do a component, like a list component. What I really want for this one is like, you know, it uses the render data function. So I think that's, I know when I first learned that like render data function, that was like, but it was like pretty cool. It's like, oh wow, I can, as a prop, I can pass a component down. I can have a, you can have a component be a prop. That's what we're doing with the list loader. This render data is just a functional component. That we can call right here. So it's pretty nice. Cool. Yeah. Any questions on the homework? So keep working on the has many, the doctor assignment, but add these to your homework and then add them to your starter project as well. And yeah, I think this is a little confusing, but I also think this is fun. Like this can get fun too. So. And it's your starter project. You can make these your own custom components. You can have them look how you want them to look. Cool. Let's go ahead, take lunch. Thank you, everybody. Hit me up on Slack if you have any questions or anything. We'll see you back at 2.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
See you
Thank
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Have a good day. Or good lunch, I should say.